Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, back with what is possibly one of my dumber builds in a while, and you gotta have a dumb build every now and again to make your other builds look a little bit smarter, right? I think it works that way. So what I ended up making here is a champion with ballistas or totems, and Barrage, Volley Fire, Wanding, Impale, Stacking, Pure Fizz goodness. It is dubbed Arcane Spaghetti for obvious reasons, and the idea is that you have wanding or bow users, I suppose, but I wanted to build around wand with this one. You grab a bunch of totems. In this case we can get up to 8. You have volley fire, you only need one of those jewels, and all of a sudden you have 6 extra projectiles on your barrage. And with that, you have a lot of projectiles spewing out all over the place from each totem. If you stack some physical damage and some impale, especially with champion, then you start to get some semi-respectable DPS going on, and it ends up being somewhat of a not completely pathetic build, but it is just yet another in the long list of frame-killing builds. For some reason, anything that's kind of funky seems to be destroying frames these days, and this is absolutely no exception. You can, of course, use the Barrage microtransaction, which is, in this case, quite literally pay to win, because if you put it on, you get much better frame response from all these tough fights. Especially metamorphs are most noticeable, where you have 8 totems spewing out like 7, or I think it's 9 projectiles at this point per attack, and the 6 out the side with volley fire. It completely just kills your frames, but when you get the MTX on, it's actually still pretty smooth. So yeah, pretty much pay to win with this MTX, but the default MTX or no MTX is what we've been playing with most of the time because it just looks so much cooler. The comparison is essentially uncooked spaghetti versus cooked spaghetti, and we enjoy our cooked spaghetti quite a lot, so it is Arcane Spaghetti. And this is just how Barrage wand animation looks now, because I've had a lot of people ask if there's some sort of microtransaction going on. This is the default, this is what you get without paying any money, and frames are few and far between using this setup. The playstyle really isn't my cup of tea still. I'm reminded every single time that when I play totems, I'm really not a big fan of the totem playstyle. Having to press totems and then run around and have them do the work and basically pre-firing them for every situation just isn't really quite as fun to me anyway. Jumping around and just smashing shit by yourself. The real highlight of this type of build is going to be boss fights and places where you can get well established. So it's not too bad for metamorphs. You can place down all your totems. That's a good example of a metamorph with no MTX. You can place down all your totems and then get established, and then they do good work, and you basically just run around. And in this situation, I do have plenty of buttons to press. I've got a focus button, I've got to put my blood rage up, I've got to press all my flasks, I've got to get frenzy going with the power charge on crit and the curse, and then I've got Vile Haste on the other thing, on the control setup. So there is a lot to press, but it's still basically not you doing the work, it's your totems doing the work. And for mapping, it's a little meh, in my opinion, just because of that. It wasn't exactly slow. We got to level 91 in like 15 hours, 14 hours, while doing all of the Awakener up to Awakener 8. Did all the Conquerors, did a bit of delving. So it wasn't that slow or anything. It's just not my preferred playstyle, I don't think. It feels a little bit off, having to constantly juggle your totems from pack to pack and hoping that they're always going to be up. There is, however, a pretty good synergy here with Champion. So this is a Champion character. It's not a Hierophant because I didn't really need one extra totem and that little bit of totem synergy. I instead wanted all the good stuff Champion has to offer. And the big synergy here is that the totems will always be taunting whenever you're putting them down, and it actually results in you getting hit almost never. In most totem characters, you're going to run into packs and occasionally get hit, especially before being well established. With this one, I found that I am actually rarely getting hit because totems are always chucking out their taunt, and for the most part, I'm just not the target for their fire at all. I basically never get hit, and I died very few times on this character, even though it was pulling like 5k life, but it's got some good defensive properties, some good armor, evasion, fortify, and then on top of that, the totems are taking like all of the damage almost always. So for that, it ended up being somewhat of a success. The single target wasn't too bad. We could do metamorphs, we could do all maps up to like tier 15, 16. I didn't even do any 16s, I was just doing 14s and 15s. But then we did the Guardians, the Conquerors. That was fairly smooth. It wasn't the best DPS in the world, but it's going to be hard to go from the boys' Savior Berserker version into anything else, and this one still kind of held its own. And then I've got an Awakener kill for you after I go over the video. And that was a pretty smooth Awakener kill, if I have to say so myself. It's a nice playstyle, good DPS, and totems are still pretty solid in this current meta, I think. So let's jump into what the character looks like and how I built the entire nonsense that this is. So here's a character, currently level 91, called Arcane Spaghetti. What did I say it took us to get there? 17 hours in the end, and did all the content. And it was respectable enough, but not the most fun for a totem playstyle, I don't think. It was just kind of fun putting together and trying to figure out. But it plays somewhat similarly to Ice Spear totems. And I'd say if you're gonna make a totem build, maybe Ice Spear totems are still better, but I haven't done it recently. I would just assume it's pretty good at the moment, and funner overall. Either way, the way we built the character is around champion, just because we want the taunt, we want the enemies take damage and then cannot evade attacks. As well as that, we wanted Master of Metal for the Impale stuff, and then we just grabbed Unstoppable Hero for a bit of extra survivability and defense. And we do get Fortify these days as a wanding character by shield charging with our Fortify attached. So we grabbed a pretty basic wand. This one was 1 Exalt, crafted the perfect Fizz onto it, and then corrupted it for 30 quality. Pretty basic Fizz wands out there these days are about 280 plus DPS. Physical DPS just do not cost much. The real high ones are like 350 or so, and it's fairly easy to make your own fairly basic one, but when they're this cheap, why bother? I tried crafting a little bit, ended up just buying something pretty basic. Ideally, you're going for Fizz and attack speed. Crit is kind of an afterthought because we're not really scaling crit too much in the build at the moment, but it is still worth getting if you can. And the Fizz's extra cast does nothing for us since we are pure Fizz and Impale. We then have a Lionized Vision chest because Pierce seems to work pretty nicely in our build, and there's nothing else super special we can get from the new influence mods and stuff. So it's basically a 7-link chest, costs 1 or 2 exalts, 6 linked, so pretty easy stuff. You then have Barrage attached to Brutality, Vicious Projectiles, Impale, Ballista Totem, and multiple totems. So while we run around mapping, we do press 2 totems at once with multi-totems, and that gets us to a total of 8. Once we want to go single target mode, we swap multi-totems out for Maim, which should be a DPS increase, and then you're only pressing 1 totem at a time, and you can only have 6 of them up. So you can still do this setup all the time if you'd rather, with 6 totems instead of 8, because it does cut your damage, but you do have 2 extra totems, while this gives you more damage and then less totems. So I just really wanted the 2 totems at a time for mapping, so that's kind of why I did it, but trying out without it, it doesn't feel all that necessary anyway. Aside from that, we then just try and stack some flat physical, and it's basically just an Impale build. So we've got some pretty fucking whatever ring with some physical damage on it. Chaos spammed that one with an attack modifier catalyst, physical damage as well, some int. The build does need about 150 int from gear, I think, since we don't get much from the passive tree. Grabbed a Barrage attack speed enchant here, used a Jagged, Pristine, and Bound Fossil, I think, to get the reduced mana reserve and then the Fizz damage. Because it's pretty damn good to get more reduced mana reserve to fit all that shit in. I crafted a shield with alt regaling, so the idea was to get +1 totem and 15 reduced mana reserve. Managed to regal that on, and we got ourselves a 3-modded shield with some extra focus button just for double damage. I don't know. It's a pretty out there shield. You can get the combo pretty easily, but with any good stats on it, it's kind of hard to get. And I'm not sure it's all that necessary to have the reduced mana reserve. Without the reduced mana reserve here and there, you can honestly just get rid of Herald of Purity, and you probably won't notice much of a damage loss anyway. It's only 20 to 30. We're not really scaling too much around it. But yeah, if you can get all the same reduced mana reserve, you've then got Enlighten, Pride, and Herald of Purity sitting in that shield. We then have just some boots of chaos spammed for some movement speed, resists, gloves that were like 4 chaos that just have some int, attack speed, life, and the crafted focus mod, which is a suffix, and a belt that just has reduced mana flask charges and some life resists, and then an amulet that I used previously in a different character, bunch of fizz, and some multi with some good stat allocation, since we do need a lot of int for the build. So nothing terribly special about the build. It's just basically being carried by the fact that you have 8 totems. We need a mana flask for that. 8 totems, lots of projectiles, and lots of Impale. You can see our totems currently maximum of 8, fires 7 projectiles. If you press Dying Sun, you got 9 projectiles, so 9 of your barrage projectiles are going to hit directly on the enemy. And then we have a volley fire, which will add another 6 projectiles that shoot out to the sides, and that's just pure clear speed. These aren't going to add to single target at all, so don't be fooled into thinking you need this to do more single target damage. It's just for clear speed. It instead of shooting directly in front of you, will shoot out to the sides and makes Barrage more of a clear skill. So aside from that, we've also got Maim, Flesh and Stone, only ever in the Blood stance, and then Dread Banner and Enlighten attached there, Flame Dash, Blood Rage, and Haste. And then Frenzy, Ass Mark, Power Charge on crit, and Curse on hit. So the things that we do once we get our totems down is attack with Frenzy, try and get the Frenzies up, try and get the Power Charges up, and Curse on hit. And then you got Shield Charge, Faster Attacks, Fortify for our movement, and Summon Stone Golem. And passive tree, to begin with, we went down and then out to the side and got all of our Impale shit and some of the defensive stuff, and then Iron Grip. But I think primarily to begin with, I definitely went down to get +1 totem, and then over here to get +1 totem. So by level, I don't know, 30, you've already got like 6 totems going, and 5 I think actually, and then by level 38 you've got 7 totems. So you can get your totems going real early in this sort of a build, and then went out, grabbed Impale, and then went all the way up here and grabbed some crit and damage and physical damage stuff. As far as the ascendancies are concerned, I think I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8. Now, that's about it for the build. Before just showing you the Awakener, I couldn't fix mana. I tried to fix mana by making things free with minus mana costs. Ultimately, it's a bit too uncomfortable, and you basically just have to use a mana flask. I was using a Quicksilver for a while instead of Dying Sun, but we didn't really need to move that fast, considering totems get placed and then you move on, place totems, move on. So got rid of the Quicksilver and have pure utility setup. As far as the build is concerned though, I can't really recommend playing it. It's fun and a bit, you know, out there to make and craft and think about, but I didn't have all that much fun actually mapping with it. Had a bunch of fun just seeing the effects and having bad frames and doing boss fights, but it didn't feel particularly satisfying to map with. At least for me personally, plenty of people said that it looked pretty satisfying to map with. So to each their own, but I think you can probably do better with your time. If you want to try it out, feel free to, but yeah, bit of a word of warning from the creator himself. Maybe pick a better build. You can probably do better. And anyways, here's the level 8 Awakener kill. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.
A real challenge. You finally caught my attention. Die.
Pretty solid.
Why run? What's the point?
Why run? That's the same thing he always does. Nuh-uh. I remembered. But I don't think he fucking threw it down anyway. Yeah.
The others found strength in their projections.
Monkass.
They became reluctant.
Monkass.
So foolish.
There is only
Be silent. Die.
M'lady.
Gotta be dead by now. I'm trying to not press any more flasks. Dashing Daisy thinks it's 21 so. Just need to make sure I got flasks up for actual like burn phases. That's a
M'lady.
rare voice line, I think. Thanks, Vukovic, for the 11-month resub.
Life really interesting enough to warrant all this pain.
Oh shit! He kills the totems real well. Jesus.
Die.
That sucks. I gotta repress him. That's bad for my mana.
Die.
Yeah, I really don't want to like run out of mana flask. I'm scared to re-put down totems. Got a decent little bit. Yeah, that little meter attack easily kills all my totems at once. So we wait for a few different phases.
is everlasting fire.
I felt
Another hat! Awakener was good. Is that my second one of those, I think? I think so. That's not bad.
Cirrus, this was all my fault. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
But... wow. Lord of the Hats. That's what they call me. Deeps was pretty good. Once you get all your totems down, you're like... and we're a fairly thick build, which is pretty good too. It's not bad.